from the middle part of the animal round back of where our rib cages are, and this is what we're going to get things like racks of lamb from, or you'll get lamb cutlets. Okay, this is also the best eye of the meat on there, so some chefs take it off and call it loin of lamb on the menu and just pan roast it, and it's absolutely beautiful. But what they would do is trim out this wonderful eye of meat and just use that. What we're going to be doing today is making this into mini racks of lamb, because the level 3s are going to do the synoptic for it. But you guys have got to know how to do this, because there may or may not be a question on your test paper about it. Okay, and so I'm going to go through the processes of how to do it. The first thing to have a look at is the quality of it, of course. We want to make sure it's a good quality. It's a nice dry piece of meat. It has been in a bag, so it was a little bit sticky when I first took it out. That's why I've left it standing for 5 minutes, just to air dry a little bit. Okay. Anybody know what we call the skin on lamb?
Bark.
I'm not doing dog impression. Yeah, we call it the bark. Okay, and we need to remove the bark, but what I don't want to do is remove all of the fat as well. Okay, we've also got this little thing inside here. Anybody know what that's called?
Cool.
That's the paddywhack. Okay, we want to move that out as well, because we don't want that in our lamb cutlets. It's very elastic. Okay, so the way to remove the bark, which is the first thing that we're always going to do, is to take the bark off from the head end down to the tail end. Okay, the reason we do that, okay, is because underneath the layers of fat sort of overlap each other like that, and if you do it from the other end, or try to do it from this end, what you end up doing is tearing into the fat, which then tears into the meat. So it's important that when you remove the bark from the head end down towards the tail end of the animal. Now, how do I know which is the head end and which is the tail end of this animal?
The taper, because then towards the top.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
The ribs.
What about the ribs?
One end is longer than the other.
It is, but that's just the way the butchers cut it off, rather badly actually, from the from the breast, where he separated the breast off of it.
Is it the size of the spine?
No. What it is, what you usually get, and our butcher has kindly trimmed it out, you normally get in the first cutlet, okay, you normally get a little piece of the shoulder blade.
Yeah.
Still in one end, so you can have a look at that end and you can see actually the gap where he took it out. The other end you wouldn't have that, but the other end is a perfect eye of meat. Okay, because anyone tell me what is the next joint that attaches to this? No, not the hip. It's where you level 3s are going to be doing your rosettes from.
Saddle.
It's from the saddle method, yeah. So this is where this attaches to the saddle. So the saddle is a continuation of this muscle. Okay, so that's where the perfect eye of meat comes. So we know from looking at this which end is the head end, because it's either going to have the shoulder blade in, or a gap where the shoulder blade's been taken out. And the eye of the meat is not quite as good as the other end, because this is where it comes from the shoulder, and that's where it continues onto the saddle. So we know that that's that. So what we're going to do to remove this is take off the bark. You can see, and this is one of the processes, but we've not got to do this on this one today. One of the processes, the very first thing I'd got if I'd got a whole best end, was I would cut along there, which the butcher's already done. So very first thing we're going to do is separate the best end from the breast of lamb. Okay, we've not got to do that because the butcher's done it for us. But separate the best end from the breast. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the bark, and the best way to remove the bark is to go in behind the skin. Okay, from the head end, you can see where the shoulder blade bit was, and the way I find it best to do is to loosen it all the way along first. Okay, go absolutely all the way from top to bottom, and then what you can do is get a good old grip. And you can see I'm holding the meat with my thumb so that it's not coming down. And what you should be able to do, occasionally you'll need to cut through a little bit of the collagen that's holding it on and the sinew, but pretty much you're going to be able to get this off fairly easily. The reason I'm taking a bit of time over it and doing a fairly good job is that I don't want to remove all the fat as well. It's only the skin that I want to remove at the minute. We can always trim the fat later, but you can't put it back on. So any little bits of collagen that I'm trimming through. Okay. And what we've got, no, very little, very little. It's quite thin, it's quite translucent in places. Okay, not good for much. I suppose you could put it in a stock, but it's just going to be greasy. Okay, so that's the second thing. The first thing we've done is remove the breast from the best end. Second thing I've done is remove the bark. And now the third thing I'm going to do while I'm here is remove this paddywhack. Okay, so this piece of elasticated thing. What's the purpose of the paddywhack? What does it do in the animal, guys? Any ideas? Vic? Okay, excellent. It would. It's basically along the back and goes up into the neck and the back of the head, so that the animal can look up and down. It's that tendon. Otherwise, it would just be looking down all the time. That's what this tendon does. So it's very, very chewy. Okay, and we don't really want it in our thing. You see, it's like a piece of elastic band. Okay, on the beef animal. Okay, the paddywhack is about that wide and long, and it's the original dog chew. Okay, you know the nursery rhyme, knick-knack, paddywhack, give the dog a bone. It's all sort of butchery stuff. Okay, so the knick-knacks are the little trimmings, paddywhack is that bit, dog a bone, so that's where that comes from on the nursery rhyme. So, what I've got to do now, and this is a difficult thing, is what we call chining. C-H-I-N-I-N-G, chining. Okay, what I'm going to do for that, I'm actually going to scrape off. I've got a tiny little bit of the fillet here that goes down into the saddle. Okay, but I want to expose the bones. Now there should be 7 bones on a rack. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and then a little bit of the saddle. What our butcher has done here, he's ripped us off a little bit. Okay, because actually there should be 7 bones on a rack, and then it goes to the saddle. So what he should have done, and I'll do it to show you. Okay, he should have cut it just there. That's where it should have been coming through from. So actually, I'm not going to be able to get cutlets out of this bit because this is from the saddle, but we are going to be able to get a couple of noisettes off of it, which we'll send through with the cutlets tonight into the restaurant. Okay, as you can actually see, while we're looking at this, this is the saddle. Okay, with the fillet on. What does that look like? Looks like a lamb chop. Yeah. So when you've got lamb chops from the supermarket, they've always got the little bit of fillet in, and they come from the saddle. Whereas your lamb cutlets that we're going to get, that we're going to trim these bones up, and racks of lamb come from the best end. All right. So
how did he rip you off? Surely he's given you
he's ripped us off. Well, he has given us more, but because there are only 7 bones on a rack and it joins up to where the saddle is, he's given us a bit more for the saddle. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's cut between he's given us a bit of the shoulder, which is really cheap meat, but charged us the weight price for the saddle. Yeah, shoulder's cheap. So what he should have done was cut down there and taken it off, and he's gone 1 bone extra. When you've seen me do whole lambs, and when the level 3s have been doing whole lambs, we always count down 6 bones from the top of the rack up in the back of the neck, count down 6 bones and cut between the 6th and 7th bone to get the start of the best end. What he's actually done, he's only counted 5 bones, so he's given us a bit of extra cheap meat that he's charged us full price for. Anyway, we won't harp on about that, I'll speak to him later. What we want to do now is chine it, and basically for your lamb cutlets, when you've got your lamb cutlets, we've got the lovely bone there, which we trim up, okay, and we've got this perfect eye of meat, okay, but what we don't want is this chunk of the spine on the top. So what we've actually got to do is saw through the bone just here, okay. So what processes have we done so far?
Remove the paddywhack we've got up to.
Yeah, what have we done before that? How many processes have we done so far?
Remove from the breast.
Okay, so we've separated the breast and the best end. That's the first thing. Remove the bark is the second thing. Remove the paddywhack, so that's 3. So the 4th process that I'm going to do is actually chine it. So you can actually see it's quite difficult to see, but if you wiggle the bones about a little bit, you can see where the ends of the bones are, where they join into the spine. If we try and cut it in there, it's going to look unsightly, so I'm going to cut about 1 centimetre above it with the saw. And the same this end, and work out where it goes, and I'm going to cut about 1 centimetre above it, and I'm just going to put a little scratch line across there with the knife. Okay, and now I'm going to get the saw. Okay, but
you said that you can't cut through meat with the saw.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit of meat on there, or is that not?
Well, it's the bone that I'm cutting. Yeah, the only bit of meat on there is just a little bit of skin sinew. Okay. When the meat's between the bones, we can't do a lot about it. But that's exactly what I told you. You know, you cut them as much meat as you can with the knife, and then go through the bone with the saw. So yeah, well done. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and cut this, but this bows in a little bit. Okay, you can't see it very well from where you are, but it bows in a little bit. So when I start sawing this, I'm going to be sawing on the outside first. What's very, very important is that we don't try to cut through these and end up cutting halfway through into the meat with the saw. Okay, I want this perfect iron meat. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to separate that out a little bit. I'm going to start to saw. And once I've gone so far through, what I can actually do is start to break the bones a little bit, which moves them out of the way. And now I can carry on with the middle bits. Again, I'm being quite delicate. The temptation is to grab the saw and just go for it, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to cut into the meat. So you see how I've done that? Okay. So I've sawn through those bones, and now what I want to do is remove this spine. And what did we call that process?
Chining.
Chining. Excellent. So I'm going to cut down the back of the spine to there. Notice how I'm cutting down right into the corner as far as I can, and then I'm going to come around that ridge of bone all the way along. There's a ridge of bone in there that I've got to get round. What I should be able to do is actually but what we've got to do now is trim this up. See how I'm trimming off this excess stuff, because all I want is this. Perfect. That's a piece of the spine. The process of removing it is called chining. Yeah. So I'm going to come down here. Okay. So now we've chined it. Okay. I'm going to remove these bits of sinew from the outside and trim them off. Okay. These bits are absolutely perfect once we've trimmed the fat off of it to go into your stock or to go into your sauce for your lamb dish. Same with your bones, you could chop them up a little bit. Okay, it's all going to be able to go into your sauce. Okay, so once I'm happy that I've trimmed off these little bits of fat, being quite particular, and we can turn it over. We're starting to get something that's starting to resemble the lamb chops a little bit more. Okay. What I'm next going to do, just above the eye of the meat, you can see almost there's a little triangle of fat. Okay. What I'm going to do is put a notch in just there, next to it. I'm going to turn it around, and on this side, the triangle of fat's a bit bigger, but I'm going to cut above where the top is, and I can draw a line with the knife to the bone and join that up. Okay, because this is going to be the meat that I keep on here. This I'm going to scrape down. Okay, but as I said, the butcher didn't do a particularly good job of cutting it straight when he was doing that, and I want all my lamb cutlets to be the same length. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure a bit further along, probably about 5 centimetres further, and I'm going to cut again another line, and that way I know that all my bones are going to be the same size, because now I'm going to saw through there. So as I said earlier, Dan, and I said to you before, that we can cut as much with the knife as we can, okay, and then the rest we're going to do with the saw. Once we've got to that stage, we should be able to what you'll see, do it on the edge of the board, get a couple of purchase. Should be able to do now is break these the bones, and with the knife, once I've been able to fold them double, should be able to cut through. Okay, so I've got one that's a little bit longer on there. And now all of these are about the same line. So, next process, what have I just done? I've chined it, and then what did I do? Okay, so I've cut all of the bones to the same length, and now what I'm going to do is these bits, I'm going to take off this. Now, as you can see, I'm actually scraping as much as possible against the bones, because we've got to scrape these bones up. The more meat and fat and flesh you can take off the ends of these bones now, the better it is. What I'll do is, while the meat's still on there, what I'm going to do, I'm going to scrape the tops of these bones clean. You see how that is? It's much easier to do while these bits of skin are still in between. These bits of flesh are still in between. Because otherwise you've got individual bones and you've got no real control. So I'm going over, and we're doing it from the top.
With the bit that you trimmed off,
Yep.
what can you do with that?
Once again, you can trim off the excess fat from it, okay, and it can go into your stock or your sauce. Yep.
But no, everything that you trim off it.
Pretty much, apart from the fat. Well, the fat you could also, you won't have time on your synoptic, but you could also, we used to do it at the Georgian Stamford when I worked there, we did lots and lots of lambs, and we used to render all the fat down, and we used to use it for frying meats and things like that for service. And if we made huge great demi-glace sauces in the brat pans and things like that, we'd use animal fat for the roux rather than using butter or oil.
Okay.
Yeah? So there's lots of things you can do with it if you've got the facilities at work to all the time, definitely. So scraping the tops of the bones, I'll turn it over, and I'm going to do the same with the bottom. Yeah, just that little bit of skin, like we said earlier. I'm scraping off of there. You don't have to do it this way, you can cut down in between them first if you like, but I just think this is the easiest way to do it, because they're not all moving around because the skin is still holding them together. Okay, see I'm scraping away from me, so I've got no way of cutting myself and not bringing it towards me. Okay. What I'm now going to do, actually, because this extra bone was the one that the butcher had given us that we didn't really want, I'm going to get rid of that now. So we're back to a 7-bone rack, as we should be. I've still left a little bit of bone. It's a bit too long on that one. Okay, got it. Wonderful. So now I'm scraping down the bones. It's still the same process. Now if I come up here, go in between, it's just like you did with your chickens earlier with your French trimming. That's what this is called. This is called French trimming.
And it's just to make it look more presentable.
It's just to make it look more presentable. Okay. All the bones are the same length. They're all completely clean of fat, or will be in a minute when I've finished scraping them. I've still got a little bit of scraping to do, but I've done all the hard work.
There's another one in there, in the fridge, isn't there?
Another one what?
Another rack of lamb in the fridge, isn't there?
No, that's for Andrew's synoptic this afternoon. You guys will get one of these each on the first week back after Christmas. Okay? So now what I want to do is just finish scraping up these bits of bone.
You sort of have an agenda in this.
Yeah, good. And they did their synoptic a few weeks ago.
What do they get?
I don't know what they what marks they got, whether it was passed by or distinction. They certainly passed. Okay, so you can see how I'm cleaning all these bones up. Okay, so we've got this now. This is our rack of lamb. Okay, I'm going to continue slicing these bones up. We don't need you to all stand here and watch these, but in between, just cleaning up. So how many different processes have we got at the minute on how to prep the best end of lamb for rack? 6 at the minute. Okay, so there's a couple more processes that we've got to do. Once we've scraped up these bones, which is all still part of the French trimming. There's 2 words on your bit of paper, but it's not 2 seconds work, is it? Okay, so tidying them up. The other thing was, if I was going to roast this as a rack, I would need to pan fry this bit of skin to start with, this bit of fat to crisp it up. So it's very important, here's the next step, to actually score the fat, because that's going to help it as you're pan frying it to render the fat out of it and crisp it all up. Yeah, make it all good and nice. All right, so. Nearly finished with this. Might as well do these. So, nice clean bones. Okay, and then the very last thing I want to do is cut them into racks, and you guys are going to be doing 2 bone racks. Okay, so I'm going to count off 2 bones and cut them through. If you were cutting them for lamb cutlets, okay, you would do them in individuals. Okay. One more thing for you level 3s. Obviously, one end of your meat has got the perfect iron meat. The other end is where it's come in the shoulder. It's not so brilliant. You will have a 7-bone rack to do. Okay, but you only need 2 2-bone racks. So cut them from the nicest end. All right, that's it.